Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me back. We're back here at SETH shop, and today we're gonna talk about geometry. We got this little thing to help me out. I do not know anything about geometry. I've heard a lot of people talking about it, and I know it plays a big part in the big boy races, but as you all know, I'm an amateur, so I wanna get introduced into the world of geometry. So, if you are a pro watching this video is not really aimed for you. So, this is for people trying to get into it and have a general understanding in the simplest of forms, even though it's a very complicated topic, okay?
Just keep in mind that, we're trying to give you some general ideas so that you can get your mind working in the right way and what to kind of think about or what to talk about when considering the geometry. We're not going to give you a recipe for your exact motorcycle today by talking about his R1. So just keep that in mind. With what we're talking about today, we're going to pick some things to give you some ideas and topics, but this is not going to be the Bible for every single motorcycle that ever existed on the racetrack.
Okay, first off, what is geometry? What are we trying to accomplish from it? Make it simple for me to understand, and what is the main purpose of it?
So when considering the geometry of your sport bike at, for the racetrack or the road, you're going to focus on a few primary things that in most bikes you can adjust or you could manipulate, and that would be something like the rake and trail, the swing arm angle, the wheelbase, and the front and rear ride heights, coupled with spring rate choice. To oversimplify rake and trail, you figure that the shorter the front of the bike is, or the more pitch that's on the front, the quicker the bike's going to turn. The caveat to the quicker it's going to turn is the lack of or loss of stability when doing so. The more you pull that front end, either by moving the entire clamp back or by turning the actual angle of the forks down, doing either one of those is going to reduce the stability of the bike. So the more rake and trail you have, the more you bring the front out, right? The farther away that front is, or the less angle you have in this situation. If you would imagine, the more the front goes out like this, and still on the ground, you'll be more stable, right? And then the more you tuck it in or pitch the bike on its nose, respectively, then the more nervous the bike's gonna be. So you'll always be looking for some sort of balance between the stability and the ability to get it to turn.
Okay, so if this was middle ground, then here means the bike is gonna turn better, but it's gonna be a little twitchy. And then this means the bike is going to be more stable, but it's going to turn
slower. It's going to take more effort to get it to turn.
Okay, I understand.
Now, for my super bike professional that's watching, we love you. And also, we can accomplish this by raising and lowering the front, manipulating the fork clamps, or raising and lowering the rear. So there's multiple ways to go at this, and there's, for different reasons and different bikes and different situations and different tracks and different riders, there might be a different way we go about achieving that. But ideally, the scenario is you want it to turn faster, you got to drop the front or you got to tuck the front, right? And
tuck, what do you mean tuck?
Well, so that would be what you call the steering clamp offset.
Like move the wheel inside?
Well, by moving the entire fork and clamps back, not by changing the angle, but by actually, you can change the triple clamps themselves and bring the forks closer to the steering stem.
Okay.
So the offset is the difference between the forks and the steering stem itself. You'll notice that if you look down, right, you look straight down at a set of forks, in most bikes you won't find that the clamps, the steering pivot is equal with the forks. There'll be an offset.
Oh, okay.
So that's your offset you're speaking about. That can also change your rake and trail numbers.
So basically you're talking about by changing that, it means that if the forks are sitting here, we move them closer to the chassis?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So we've shortened the wheelbase. We've done a few things, right? Or you can raise and lower the bike based on where the forks are. So call the forks the same, you're taking the triple clamp up and down, and that's changing the angle of the motorcycle too. Okay. So either one of those are ways that you can manipulate the front end to get it to steer better.
Okay.
And those are also a recipe or like a function of what is your recipe? What do you need? What do you want? What are you trying to achieve? So that, because everything you do, like there's a chain of events going on. You change something here, you're going to change something here. Okay. So depending on how you're trying to achieve that would be whether or not you would raise or lower the front of the bike or change the offset in the triple clamps. If you're in Motor America Super Sport, for instance, in some of the classes, Super Stock, Super Sport, you can't change the triple clamps. So you'll have to raise and lower the bike in the front of the rear to get that kind of change. But in Superbike,
so it's depending on the actual rules of the class. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Or if you're doing track days and you've got an unlimited MX, you can have whatever you want. You just buy a set of offset triple clamps and bring the front end back. You can leave the ride height up and bring the forks back, and we can get some of the same idea.
Okay. Wait. But why is it better to bring it closer and not to raise it and drop it?
Well, that's another way of achieving something you want to do in your tuning, and that we can argue about with our Superbike professionals about why they like to raise or lower the front of the bike versus bring the clamps back and forth.
Okay.
It's a different way of achieving different rake and trail numbers, and some people have specific numbers they're looking for, or they want to achieve a certain aspect of the motorcycle, so they would need to change the offset instead of raise or lower the bike. You're going after the same idea but doing it a different way.
Okay.
And you also just keep in mind that when you significantly raise or lower the front of the bike, you're manipulating the swing arm angle too, because the bike's moving. But when you just move the forks back, there'd be some change, but not as significant in the swing arm angle by just moving the forks back.
Okay.
So if you're like on a Superbike, you don't really want to be messing with the swing arm angle a whole lot to get something achieved in the front. Right? So you would tuck the forks, meaning bring the whole front end back in, so that you could leave the angle of the frame the same, so you would have the angle of the swing arm the same.
So let's say you want to make the bike turn sharper, but you don't want to fuck around with all the settings around the bike, like the swing arm angle. You just bring the forks back, and you don't mess around with it a lot.
You're going to achieve a couple of things. You're going to get a better front end angle, and then at the same time, you're going to get the wheelbase shorter at the same time. So the bike's going to turn faster because the bike's shorter.
So, and I would do that since I'm bringing the forks closer. I wouldn't mess around with the swing arm angle a whole lot.
Not as much as if you were to move the bike up and down, because just think about it like this, right?
Okay.
If the swing arm pivots here, right?
Yeah.
Right, and then you go down, you've automatically picked the back of the bike up, so you've increased the swing arm angle also.
Oh yes, I get it now.
So now, by dropping the front of the bike, you've got more swing arm angle. Now you got a more likelihood, especially on a big bike on a 1000, for the back end to start pumping.
Got it.
So now you got to deal with that. Now you got the bike to turn, but now it's wiggling like crazy on the exit, and you can't get on the gas. So you 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. Okay. There's still going to be some slight differences in rake and trail numbers, but they're insignificant compared to as changing the front.
Yeah. Like so this would be
in our audience. In this case, it's going to be for someone who has an unlimited MX or someone who has a chase card with a $1,500 limit. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you have $1,000 to drop on a set of clamps that look pretty and make the bike turn better? Yes or no?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I see. I understand. So we've been talking about swing arm angle. Why? Okay. So first off, what does the change in swing arm angle do to the bike? Now, obviously, it does this, but when it comes to like the handability, how does it translate to the way you ride it?
Generally speaking, the swing arm angle, right? A more positive angle, meaning that the higher it is, right? The less.
What is a positive swing arm angle?
So you see how the swing arm's down, right?
Yeah.
And then if we were to press on the bike, let me press on it. Then see how the swing arm has less angle; it goes closer to flat.
Yes.
Right. So the closer to flat or zero you are, you'll get more grip the flatter it is. Right? Imagine if the swing arm was like this. So look at the MotoGP bikes when they launch them, right? The whole bike's like squatted on the ground, right? Yeah. And if you look at the swing arm, the thing's tipped down, not up. Most of your swing arms are going to be tipped like this, right? Like this. Yeah. And then they put especially the new BMWs, they have what they call a pivot offset. So this will allow you to lower the swing arm pivot. So now what happens when you get on the gas, the pivot bolt and the axle bolt, that's what we're talking about, the angle. What's the angle between this bolt and that bolt? Is it flat, or is it positive, or is it negative?
So negative, it will be even higher.
Right. Okay. So the more negative it is, the more it grips. Think about it. It sits down. The more it sits down, the more it digs in, right? Okay. And the higher it is, the harder of a time, the higher the back end, the harder the tire's going to want to spin. It's going to have less grip. The more it digs down in there, the more grip it has. Okay. So the less swing arm angle you have, the more grip you have mechanically. That's how it works. The problem you'll have, when you start to lose a swing arm angle, is that you also start to lose some of your radius. You won't steer as well. right? So that's why you can't just run around with a negative swing arm angle because the bike won't turn.
Okay.
Right? So you need it to be able to, obviously change has got to go up and down. So while you're running it like this, the thing's slightly positive. You hit the brakes, you come in, you come down, and as you're rolling on the gas, it's going to set down in there.
Yeah.
And then the sweet spot, the actual angle, how much travel, that's a whole super bike moto data logging system, with some experts.
That's big boy shit.
But generally speaking, the idea is that the flatter the swing arm angle, the more grip you're going to have. So that's why BMW sells the pivots that'll lower the front so that you can get it closer to flat and or negative if that's even a possibility depending on your style, your angle. This gets deep into the weeds. But the idea is the flatter the swing arm, the more grip you're going to have. And then to the point of where we started was, the more you tip the front end down, the more angle you create. So the more you drop the front, the more positive swing arm angle you create naturally on the bike. So you're going to have to gas it even harder to get it back down to get that grip. So that's why on an R6, if you drop the front 10 millimeter and you run the shock, you go buy the K-Tech shock and it's at the 292 link that it comes at, and you drop the front end significantly and you start coming out of the turns, and rah, 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 and it's pitching and wallowing everywhere because the back's tall. You have
and it's
a
not
lot of
planted
swing arm
in the
angle,
ground, so it's like,
it's not digging in.
Okay.
And it's just trying to spin you out.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
So you don't have grip. You don't have enough mechanical grip.
Okay.
If you drag race, you know all about negative swing arm angle.
Yeah.
Because you probably setting your bike up to be flat from the get-go.
Yeah.
And then it goes negative when you hit the gas because of the linkage and the spring and the rod height and what you're using, right? Yeah. So the drag racer guys are gonna love negative swing arm angle, and we're gonna struggle with it a little bit on the road course because the bike won't steer when it gets like that.
Okay, I understand now. Yeah. What is the main purpose that we're trying to get? To keep it as flat and close to zero as possible all of the time, so we have the perfect balance between power down and steering?
Well, I don't want to box myself in and end up in a comment contest, right? That's going to be different per motorcycle.
Okay.
Generally speaking, the 1000s are way more sensitive to swing arm angle than a 300 or a 250 just because of the power. Okay. You got to consider that the swing arm's primary job is to get the power on the ground.
Okay.
You need suspension to suspend the rear end to hold the bike up in the air so that the swing arm itself can literally brace itself, like brace the motorcycle and hold the wheel and generate the ability for it to spin, right? So to get the power out of the engine into that back tire and hold the whole motorcycle together, that's the job of the swing arm. Got it. And then the geometry part is how much angle are we, where are we, and what are we doing with that to manipulate what we want? I'm over exaggerating, but the swing arm angle on a Ninja 300 isn't nearly as crucial as it is on a M1000. Okay, right? Makes sense, yeah. The S1000 and the M1000 have two different swing arms that are two different links with two different spring rates and two different linkages and two different shocks. Why? Because it makes more power, it needs a longer swing arm. They had a different recipe, right? They went with a different linkage. It could use a softer spring. The softer spring gives you more grip on the edge. Yeah. Okay. We can have another superbike argument. Okay. But that's, their way of changing the recipe to try to find something better, right? Okay. But in general, what did they do? They made a longer arm with a stronger linkage. By a
longer arm, how much longer do you mean?
On that, you're talking about an inch or two longer.
Okay, so it's like very small changes. So very small changes make a hell of a difference, right? That's right. So, and we're talking about inches, like a couple of inches could make a huge difference.
I would think a couple of inches would be a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah. Okay, so when we're talking about extending swing arm for actual racing in a road course.
That's not a thing.
What do you mean?
On a super bike, for a pro racer, yes.
Yes.
Maybe this much.
This much.
But beyond, Gerloff and SDK,
nobody's gonna actually.
We're grasping at straws here.
I get it. Okay, so we spoke about this in the last video. We got a lot of hate because we did make a little mistake, and it was if we move the forks back and we extend the swing arm just a little, the center of gravity. He said that it moves backwards, but we were speaking after 2 hours, and he was tired, and we just rambling. It actually moves
forward.
It actually moves forward. So. All the people mentioned in the comments were a little right. So now explain to me center of gravity and what the whole point of it, what does it do? Because I have no clue why it would matter, right?
The general concept is that the further forward the center of gravity is, the better the motorcycle is going to steer.
Okay.
So, the lower the center of gravity, the easier it will be to steer. And the higher the center of gravity it is, regardless of forwards or backwards, the more top heavy the motorcycle is, it's going to be harder to get it side to side. Like if you want to think about how like this R1 and some of the new Panigales and some of the other motorcycles, you're noticing that they're trying to get the fuel cell lower in the frame. And you'll notice when you pick the gas tank up, you'll see like the fuel cell's kind of deep. And like when it closes, it sits down. They're trying to get the fuel as low as they can. The reason they're putting this plastic cover up on the top right here, and there's a dead zone where used to the gas tank will be full up to here, and now the gas tanks are deeper and lower in the back of the bike. Even on like the Panigale, some of the gas is under your seat. So the idea is to get the weight from up here down, and the lower they can get the weight, the better it is. Like for you to be able to ride the bike, it's easier to steer the bike, it's easier to transition the weight.
So basically, the lower the weight in the bike, the lower the center of gravity, and then the lower the center of gravity, the easier it's gonna steer, because basically the weight is down here.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
That means that if I have a full tank of gas, it's gonna be more difficult to tip it left and right.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The easiest way to really figure that one out is if you've ever done any endurance racing at all, you can ask any of the guys in the endurance series with a 6 or 6.5 gallon gas tank on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Imagine an SV650 with 60 horsepower and a 6.5 gallon gas tank.
Yeah. That's,
it's a lot to muscle around.
Yeah, probably.
And then you go up to like the Dunlop crew was running an R1 with an oversized gas tank on it, and just imagine trying to at Road Atlanta just trying to huff that thing up the top of the hill, it's side to side to side, with all that gas, and it's all they got foam in the tank to keep it from splashing around, but it's still the weight, right? When that gas tank is full, splashing or not, it's full. It's heavy, right? And so like that whole side to side.
And the liquid inside is moving to like. Okay, makes sense.
You get it to one side, then all that fuel hits and it kind of like G's out on this side. Then you got to bring it back the other way. Now you're pulling all that. You're pulling against all that energy. That's where it really noticeable. At Roebling, where you got a nice flowy kidney bean style track, you could put 10 gallons in there.
And because you're keeping so much corner speed, it's probably like sitting at the bottom and it doesn't really want to move from there, right?
You're not really like transitioning the bike side to side or front to back that much. But you're gonna go to
the level
Road
is
Atlanta.
probably at Roebling is doing this, and then at Road Atlanta is doing this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
So that's what you're up against, honestly, is that.
For example, if I want to optimize my R1 for the track, right, and it comes stock, let's say, would you say that the center of gravity comes somewhere around here, and then we want to optimize it to be down here, or down here, or down here? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, a little forward and down is
forward and down. So we want to. So stock comes.
But like I said, listen, this is where we're going to get into
very specific.
I'm going to get hate mail because like the GSXR and the ZX10 and the S1000 and the R1 all have slightly different, and as we're racing them and learning to work on them and develop them, we find that we like different things with different models, right?
Yeah.
So like there's no blanket explanation of lower and forward is always better, not necessarily.
Okay, so
let's just say that in general, lower is less work and easier to ride.
Okay.
And from there, the sky's the limit on how picky you want to be about where you want your center of gravity and how you're going to get there. Are you going to change this? Are you going to change that?
Okay, so let's talk about the specific situation that happened to me this week in our barbers. So I called you and I say, hey, listen, on turn 2, I'm having this issue. The issue was that I was flipping the bike, turn 1 left, fine, and then I flip into turn 2, and number 1, it wasn't keeping a tighter line, and number 2, the front was shattering as I'm in deep lean angle. And I called you, and you told me to do 2 things. Number 1, add three turns of preload. How much millimeters is that?
About 2.
About 2 millimeters only? So 3 turns is 2 millimeters?
It varies from shock to shock and from model to model. But
so in my case,
you're basically getting away with adding a couple millimeters of ride height.
Okay, so basically I just up the ride height of my R1 by 2 millimeters?
And a ride height adjustment is a ride height adjustment. A preload adjustment is more about putting some extra pressure into the spring, but by default that also lifts the bike.
Okay.
So you're getting a 2 for 1.
Okay.
We wanted a little bit more spring pressure,
and
we wanted a little bit more ride height. The reason we wanted that was because turn 2 at Barber, once you get it turned in, the turn is not necessarily really heavily off camber, but you're going downhill, so the grip is kind of going away from you as you begin to accelerate.
Okay.
And what you're finding is that as you get turned in and you get off the brake lever, once you started to get the bike to transition, it's time to open the throttle. Okay. As soon as you're opening the throttle, you're unloading the front end.
Yeah.
And the front end, you're losing steering angle.
Yes.
So the geometry is working against you as far as getting it to turn.
So basically the front wasn't as planted, and that's why it was skipping?
The skipping in that case is happening because the front is becoming unweighted.
Okay.
So not only are you losing your steering geometry because now your front has rose back up, you're getting the bike planted. The swing arm angle is good. The bike's gripping because it's sitting flat, but now it's not steering. Okay. So what we're doing with the preload is add a little spring pressure and add a little ride height at the same time, so that the front will stay planted and allow you to have that ability to keep it turning as you're opening the throttle or getting back from negative, right? Like you're just trying to, even if you're just trying to get the neutral throttle to get it to steer and get it to turn, as you're adding in the throttle, you're losing your grip because you're pulling the front end back up.
And that's why you also mentioned that I need to use my body position a little bit front and forward
to get the nose weight forward
to help it. Okay.
Because I don't necessarily want to say, okay, why wouldn't you just drop the front? Okay, that's a good explanation. Yeah. Because when you come in over the hill and going back down into Charlotte's Web or into turn 1, for instance, you're heavily loading the front and you've got a massive amount of front end load, and I don't want the front sitting down. So if I drop the front, that's less stability on the front. I need all the front end support I can give you coming down that hill in Charlotte's Web or into the museum, turn back over that curbing or back into turn 1, because you're going to need the support there. So I don't want to sacrifice the stability that you need in those other 3 corners. Just trying to get it to turn a little bit on the backside.
So it's all about, again, optimizing the ride for the track and your
This is a specific scenario about your R1 and your lack of buffet eating and inability to transfer weight forward and backwards because you're not a heavy guy.
Yes.
That's a common theme with someone who doesn't weigh a lot of weight.
Yeah.
The weight transfer can become a problem. With someone that's extra heavy and loves to go to the buffet, the weight transfer is the opposite problem. I'm heavier than you, so as I lean forward, or when I grab, say you and I ride the same motorcycle, right?
Yes.
And let's just say that we're the same skill and we're the same speed, and that's a fairy tale, but okay. Yeah. And then we go grab the same brakes at the same mark on the same bike, right? Yeah. You ride it, then I ride it, right? Yeah. Same exact motorcycle. I'm gonna compress the front end more. All things held considered the same, skill level, everything else, I weigh more than you. So I'm gonna put more weight transfer into the bike. So in general, I'm likely gonna need a little bit more preload in the front or a heavier spring rate than you, in general. Yeah. And the same on the back. Call it all the same. I'm probably gonna need 1 rate stiffer in the back and maybe a couple more rounds of preload in the same scenario, right? To be able to maximize or optimize the geometry for my weight compared to you. Let's just say we're the exact same speed.
Okay. Okay.
Are they going to be huge changes? No. But if I was 280 pounds and you're 180 pounds, we're going to have a huge difference. Yeah. Right? But we're still trying to achieve the exact same thing. We want some sort of optimal front end travel and some sort of optimum swing arm angle to be able to get ourselves around the track the right way. How we will get there will depend on the rider, the speed, the this, the that. But that's why I'm saying there's a lot of things that go into this. It's not just a blanket. You know, all R1 should have 1.0 front springs. No. No. They're different people for different everything, right? Yeah. So that's why that changes and matters.
Yeah, okay. What are black and white examples of when geometry is, like, for example, wrong? Like, let's say somebody doesn't know what the fuck is wrong with the bike, and tell me an example where geometry might be the issue.
I think the easiest way for someone to ride a motorcycle and talk about it is go ride at 80%, right? And just ride around and see, does it feel to you like, you know, going from riding your best, right? You're riding at your optimum. So like you may be making mistakes and maybe one time you hit the apex and sometimes you don't. But if you just back off a little bit, even say if you can get it to 90, right? Is like if I'm going out in the morning warm up, the first thing I'm gonna do is just ride around and see, does the bike feel okay? Like, how's the bike feel? Yeah. Is there something noticeable that I cannot achieve, or for some reason, like I'm looking over here and I'm turning on the gas and it's running wide, or like I notice that for whatever reason, doesn't matter who I'm riding with in that intermediate group, I cannot follow someone out of the corners. Like for whatever reason, we get really hard on the gas. I'm going over here and they're going over there, or I don't care where I'm at. Every time I'm on the brakes, the whole bike's just moving around on the brakes. Like I could try to calm down a little bit and be a little smoother, but it doesn't matter what I try to do within reason. The bike's just moving around when I'm on the brakes.
Yeah.
These are like really common ways of like trying to identify problems, right? So like typically speaking, mind you, we're gonna get specific, but like if you're moving your body around while you're on the brakes, and you wait to move your butt over until after you grab the brakes, right?
Yeah.
So you grab the brake and then you move, which is common with most people who aren't a professional rider.
Yeah.
You're probably going to cause the bike to start moving around because you're moving around while you're on the brakes.
Yeah.
And if as your hands are moving and you're squeezing, the whole back of the chassis starts doing that. But let's say that you know to move your butt before the brakes, and that's not the case, and you are not upsetting the bike, but the bike, no matter what you do, is moving around the brakes. Chances are the front of the bike is too low. So that could be two things. You don't have a stiff enough spring in the front, or your geometry is too low in the front. So when you go hit the brakes, the whole bike's swinging side to side because the angle's so short in the front. You don't have enough trail.
Oh, that just clicked me.
So you pick the front of the bike up, you're gonna push the front end out, and you're gonna get more stability so you can brake harder.
Okay.
And then you're gonna keep doing that until all of a sudden you get to the top of the hill at Road Atlanta, and instead of going left, right, left, you go straight.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's the give or take part of tuning it, is you've got to find that number, right? So do you stick 5 mil to fork cap out, or you 10 mil out, or you flush? And again, that goes back to what motorcycle are you riding? How much do you weigh? What spring is in there?
Yeah.
There's no blanket answer to this.
Let's try to explain this about one corner specific, right? So if there is a straight, and at the end of the straight, a very, very hard braking, and I brake, and I set my body position before I brake, and I do everything how it's supposed to, and the bike does everything great, right? So it's not moving side to side, it's not doing anything weird, it's braking perfectly, right? Now I go into a different track, and it's the same situation. It's a straight, but now you're going downhill. And when you're braking, same, you're putting your body position before the corner, you're setting yourself perfectly, and you're adding the same amount of pressure. However, the rear gets unstable when you're braking downhill. Is that because you should probably add a little bit of height to the fork so that you change the geometry so that you're not braking like this and you're kind of braking a little bit more forward?
In that case, I would add preload, because chances are your geometry on the bike's not necessarily wrong. When you're coming downhill, you're gonna have more momentum, more weight, and more mass coming with you.
Oh, okay.
So you're braking at, let's just say, CMP into turn 1 or a turn 11, which is a completely flat turn.
Yes.
That's really sharp.
Yes.
Right? But you're flat.
Yeah.
Okay, say you're good there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you come to Road Atlanta and you go into 10 and you go into 12 and you got, you're dropping stories at a time coming downhill and from 6th gear.
Yeah.
And the thing starts to move around all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to pick the front of the bike up, because you might not be able to get the bike to side when you get back up to the top of the hill for 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
So maybe I just put some spring preload in it, put a few rounds of preload in it, and
so that it
keep
holds your
slowly
weight
adding
up a little
preload
more.
because that will push it up a little bit, but it'll also put a little more pressure on the spring. So I'll give you that benefit, like you'll have a little bit more spring to use.
Okay, so that one is, okay, I understand now.
You and I were talking about before about, people and getting crazy about changing their bike and changing their setup and all that. If you're not Cambodia, you probably don't need a completely different setup for every single track, right?
Yeah.
And especially if we're talking about doing track days, man, a little preload here and there in the front or the rear, depending on where you're going, is really all you'd really want to change, unless you're just at like an awfully bumpy track one day.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, for my Florida guys, right, we go to Homestead a lot, we go to Daytona a lot, we go to Roebling, we go to Jennings, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll sneak off to Road Atlanta and Barber a couple times a year, or CMP, because it's in the southeast and we can get there.
Yeah.
I tell them like this: we'll set the bike up with spring rates for your weight, we'll get the sag number right, and when we go to Roebling and we go to Jennings, we don't really run much preload because it's mostly flat, there's not a lot of really heavy braking, and there's not a lot of elevation to like really deal with, right? So we don't need a lot of preload, so we'll kind of run it light to none.
Yeah.
And then when we come back to Homestead, well, we're ramming on the brakes everywhere. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a couple rounds in the back, because you're going to be on the gas really hard from a slow speed, and then we're going to put some preload in the front, maybe up to 10 rounds of preload in the front to keep you from bottoming out.
Yeah.
We didn't make a completely redesign the bike, but we just added some preload to the front, added some preload to the back to support our weight, to keep our geometry closer to where we would have it at a track where we wouldn't be braking so hard.
Oh. Yeah, so you want the bike to be as neutral as possible throughout all the tracks, and that's why you change the settings, right?
Yep.
So you want it to behave similarly everywhere.
Because what you want to do, right, is like, and you're riding the motorcycle, is you would like to be thinking about what the motorcycle is doing as little as possible and more about what you're doing. Where am I looking? Where am I going? How does the tires feel? What's going on in front of me? Is there an ambulance in the middle of the track? Right?
Flashback.
I'm just saying. So these are things to think about.
Yeah.
You know, has someone crashed and is standing in the middle of the freaking turn, scratching their head? It happens. So these are the things you want to be able to think about, not so much about, you know, what's the swing arm angle, right? Like, that's not really what you think about. Now, mind you, on your best laps, when you're really digging in, you know, call it in qualifying if you're racing, whatever, right? You're putting in a hot lap. Are you thinking about, is the bike steering? Yes. Are you thinking about what is the tire grip? Yes. But in the context of, you already kind of know what it should be doing. Is it doing what it should be doing? Like what you expect it to do, right?
Yeah.
So that's the idea of getting a baseline setup, is to where you understand and know how the motorcycle works and thinks or feels and responds to you, right? And then that way you know what to do to fix that, or to keep getting better, or to keep, you know, doing whatever you're doing. That's the idea behind it, is for you to kind of comply with you or work with you, not against you.
I understand.
If you just think about that entire conversation we had about center of gravity, right? Where you're sitting on this motorcycle and how you're riding the motorcycle is going to affect that as much as me putting 5 millimeters of ride height in the shock or in the forks, right?
Okay.
Where you are on the motorcycle and how you're riding it is every bit as much of important as what's going on with the springs. That being said, the same thing happens when you're on the motorcycle, right? If you were to sit up and brake, the fact that you set up and turned your chest into a wind sail and put more weight back is going to create more stability in the front end, because you're up and off the front. You're going to nosedive the thing. You're going to grab a handful of brake, the bike's going to dip, right? But if the first thing you did coming out of the tuck was to pop up, it's going to pull the front end up, and then you grab the brake, then it sets down from higher. So you've got more, you've started with more travel.
So I'm full gas, pop my chest up, and then it loads the back. Well, the center of gravity changes to the back, I guess.
Well, yeah, exactly. And you're gonna pull the weight. You're gonna pull weight off the front end. So the weight of the bike's gonna come back up a little bit naturally. Then you're gonna grab the brake and stab it down. But you started from, you know, closer to full extension than from halfway, and then you've got more travel. So you'll end up, you know, not as close to the bottom as you would if you were full tuck and just grabbed a handful of brake.
So this goes back to the whole setting up the rear of the bike before braking, so that it's
get your butt over it, get your butt back, get yourself in position. That way, you can just pop up.
So it's like full throttle, pop out, and then the wind is gonna transfer like the weight a little bit back, and it's gonna slow you down a little, and then brake, and then the bike is gonna stable itself.
Yeah, the main idea of you sitting
throttle.
up is to pull weight off the forks.
Yeah.
Before you stab it and put all the weight right back on the forks.
I understand.
You have more travel to use that way, and more stability throughout the braking process by doing that.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then that's one other reason why you would use the rear brake, to just help that.
If you have the sense of mind to cover the rear brake as you're coming off the throttle and grabbing the front, absolutely, because it's gonna set the back end down a little bit, and then you're gonna grab the front, so you don't get so much of that over the handlebars weight transfer type of feeling to overload the front. Because what you're gonna find as you go faster and faster and faster, what starts to become a problem is you've got so much energy transfer into the front tire while you're trying to scrub speed and trying to turn and trying to keep grip. All this at the same time. The more you can kind of balance the bike and optimize the level of grip, the better off you're going to be, right? I don't care what happens, you know, ideally you would like to keep, you know, sure, maybe you want to use as much travel as humanly possible without hitting the bottom to get it to turn in. But at the same time, if you have if you also still have good stable grip on the back, that the back tire's following you and it's not in the air, then you'll have more grip overall in the turn anyway. It'll be easier for you to get the thing turned, get the weight off the front, get back on the gas, get the bike steered, and then accelerate out if this thing's not dangling in the air on the way in.
Yeah, I'm having that issue. Like anytime I go into a hard braking corner, I'm folding the front like twice before I turn, because I'm not using the rear brake on entry, and then I'm not parachuting enough. Like I'm parachuting, but I'm not like like this. I should. We spoke about linkages. When would you change linkages on a motorcycle? Why would you?
So most of the linkages on most sport bikes are non-linear, meaning they're progressive, meaning that the deeper you get into the stroke, the stronger they are because they're built for passengers.
Yeah.
So the more the thing squats, the stronger it is.
What's linkage, by the way? The fuck is a
So
linkage?
on the bottom of the swing arm,
Yeah.
you'll see most bikes have like a couple little brackets and a little triangle piece,
Is it
right?
the silver looking
Little dog bone thing, and then the
Uh-huh,
little links right there. And you notice, like, if you ever bought a lowering kit for your bike, it's got a couple little arms that you bolt on. They're longer. That drops the bike down. Depending on how fancy your bike is, some bikes don't use linkage. They go straight from the motor to the swing arm or from the frame to the swing arm.
Yeah.
Some of the Ducatis have different setups. So there's multiple ways of skinning that cat.
Yeah.
But the general idea is that most stock motorcycles use a progressive linkage, and a lot of race bikes will use a linear linkage. And so imagine that a progressive linkage may be a bit of a banana shape. That's how it's going to create the different amount of leverage.
Okay.
And most of the racing linkages will be straight, and that'll be linear, so that it'll give you the same amount of force or pressure with the spring rate at any given part of the stroke.
Okay.
So the deeper the stroke, the more progressive the linkages, the stronger it becomes to help stabilize the bike.
Okay.
And then so when we go racing, a lot of times we'll put a linear linkage on it so it's the same all the way through the stroke.
Ooh, example of a bike. Does my bike has straight linkages? R1?
No, from the factory it's progressive, they all are.
They all are?
Most all of them are.
Am I allowed
You
to
might find like Kramer's or something cool, come out already as a race bike, may already have something like that.
like an Aprilia the Trofeo?
I don't know that bike specifically, but generally speaking, most of them are progressive.
Okay.
Generally speaking,
So would I benefit from a straight linkage?
you would.
What would it do?
It's just going to give you, the deeper you get into the stroke, the having the same spring rate and the same leverage ratio is going to give you, generally speaking, likely more grip.
So I will not slide as much on the edges of the corners as hard as I go on the gas?
That's kind of the idea.
Okay.
You can just imagine that, like, the deeper this thing gets, the stiffer more or less, the stiffer your spring's getting. That's, for my nitpickers, that's not actually what's happening. The spring rate does not actually change.
Yeah.
But you need less leverage at the top of the stroke than you do at the bottom.
Got it. So we're fucking with the leverage.
Leverage ratio.
Okay. I understand now.
So by making it flat, that ratio stays the same, and it allows you to go through the stroke. So ideally, you'll have the same amount of grip
Yes.
at the bottom of the stroke as the top of the stroke.
Oh, okay.
All
okay.
things considered equal.
Okay. I get it.
If you want to throw the monkey wrench in there,
Throw it.
the farther down into the stroke you go, the flatter or negative the swing arm angle becomes, and you have more grip. So in some cases, having a linear linkage allows you to use more of the stroke and get deeper in there and get more grip.
Of course, because it's not progressive, it's not getting.
It doesn't get stiffer
hard.
as it goes, which also means it's not trying to break the tire loose because it's pushing back harder.
Right.
So it allows it to dig in
Right.
and allows it to get flat.
Right. So if it's progressive, it means that, let's say the spring is compressed this much, it's gonna take double the force to compress it this much more than it would take to a
Ideally, yes.
Okay,
That's
okay, I get it.
oversimplifying
I
it,
get it.
yes.
Yes.
We don't want to have a super bike argument.
I
but
get
yes,
it. I get it.
yes,
I get the idea.
yes.
I get the idea.
That's the idea.
So more grip.
You have a better grip
At the-
at an optimal point in the stroke.
Got it.
Because now you're at a point where you're starting to begin to optimize the swing arm angle.
So we're looking for tenths.
Once you get a
right there, right?
exactly right. We're talking about the difference of a second a lap if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you're amazing, and we change your linkage. Like, you're probably not even gonna get a second a lap.
Yeah.
So buying the linkage is
Okay, so that's way deeper into it. Okay.
it's the same as buying those offset triple clamps for the front.
Tell me something that I should definitely know that we didn't speak about. What can I do to my motorcycle?
Well, I mean, honestly, after we set yours up, we've watched a bunch of videos, and I think, like, after our back and forth at Barber, I think on yours we got to lighten up the spring rate. We got to get back to the 1.0s in the front.
I did already.
And
I changed it there.
And did you get all the travel?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
This is something that you and I have been talking about in the last two events. We watched videos of your homestead not using all the travel, which is why I was talking about some of the video coaching is beneficial to people because you can send me videos and I can see what's going on in the videos and I can give you feedback and we can talk about it.
Yeah, so one thing, you told me to be 9 open at compression and 12 at rebound. When I put the 1/0s, it wasn't still traveling all the way down, it was having this much. So then I opened to 12, the compression. It was getting down, and then I found the perfect, but it was still skipping. Perfect spot that I found by the end of the day, 16 compression open. And it was the same exact setting, because then I asked Dylan, the Motor America guy, and I asked him, and he's like, yeah, I'm at 10 rebound and 16 compression. I'm like, fuck, I just arrived to that setting today. And I asked the spring rate, he's like 1/0s. And then he's the same, he weighs the same.
I was just gonna say, tell me how you guys compare size-wise.
The same, right?